Hello, I am Steve, and today I'm joined by my wife, Katrina, and we're going to be discussing the much talked about topic of abortion, which has been, as everyone is well aware of, in the news a lot lately. If you've been on social media, you can't escape all the controversy with people on both sides of the issue. So we've come across a number of arguments in favor of abortion that we would like to address today and kind of discuss why we think that they're not good arguments.
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of lies that are being spread, particularly by celebrities who have a large platform, and so sometimes it can be the loudest. And so we just want to combat those lies with truth.
So I came up with 3 questions to assess each of these arguments, and I think as we go through the arguments, we'll see that each one kind of answers them a little differently. So the first one is it a human being? The second, is it alive? The third, is it valuable? So we'll be using these questions to assess each of these arguments. So, want to begin with the first one?
The first lie is my body, my choice. And that's a really common lie that is said. And it's not just said by women, it's also reiterated by men that they agree that it is their body and it is their choice. And it's just a choice between a woman and her doctor. And even that the men don't get a say on whether or not she has this abortion. And sometimes it's the opposite, where it's men that are convincing the women to have the abortion, or a family member is convincing them and pressuring them. Or, that lie that it's just a blob of tissue inside the woman, therefore my body, my choice. And the reason it is a lie we'll go into.
Yeah, so looking at that argument, the first question, is it a human being? I think when we look at this, we would say that you would have to answer, no, it is not a human being. It is a part of the mother that is growing inside her womb. Is it alive? It's not a separate living thing, according to this argument. It's just like we said, kind of like a blob of tissue. I kind of think of it almost like fingernails growing. Like you can clip off your fingernail, and there's nothing moral about that action. So if you do that, there's no reason to feel any kind of guilt, because it's just
you're just going to discard.
It's just tissue matter.
It's something to discard. More. You're not going to save your fingernail clippings.
So therefore, also number 3, it's not valuable. So that makes it easy if that were the case. The only problem is this is not a scientific view to hold. The consensus of science is actually that a new human life is created at the moment of conception. I'm going to pull up a quote here that comes from a science textbook. From the textbook titled "Before We Are Born: Essentials of Embryology and Birth Defects." It says, there are different opinions on when an embryo becomes a human being because opinions are often affected by religious and personal views. The scientific answer is that the embryo is a human being from the time of fertilization because of its human chromosomal constitution. The zygote is the beginning of a developing human. So this argument just doesn't work because the science doesn't back it. So
yeah, science says that it is a life at the time of conception, which just definitely debunks that lie about it being my body, my choice. So number 2, the lie is the fetus is a parasite. A parasite is an organism that lives in or on another organism of another species, its host, and benefits by deriving nutrients at the owner's expense, so at the other person's expense. So basically sucking the life out of this other person. A
key point to draw in that definition is that it's another species. So we know, as we discussed in point number 1, that you have new human DNA created at the moment of conception. But this is human DNA. This is not another species. This is another human being that is growing inside the mother. And
the mother is providing that nutrients, which is why, we're supposed to, as we carry these babies, we're supposed to get lots of nutrients to provide for ourselves and to the baby. And yeah, so that misconception that it's just sucking the life out of this person is very untrue. So
the idea, the reason why someone would say it's a parasite is that it's an unwelcome guest, right? Like this.
This is Bruce.
Anyway, so the idea of a parasite, that's rooted in the idea, basically, this is an unwelcome guest in the mother's womb. So, which, in most cases where we're discussing abortion, it doesn't meet that definition because the mother has willfully played a part in inviting the child into her womb, through having sexual relationship and that sort of thing. Which there are exceptions to that, which we will talk about later.
We'll discuss that one later.
But
obvious.
In most cases, the idea that it's unwelcome guest is, in practical terms, that's just not true.
That's not the standard, basically. So the third lie is life begins with first breath. I know. Well, I'll let you kind of speak on that.
Yeah. So this is one that's commonly used by more the liberal Christians out there, and they would quote from Genesis 2:7, where you have the creation of Adam and Eve, and in speaking of Adam, it says, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being." So in this case, when you're answering those 3 questions, is it a human being? Well, yes, it is. Is it alive? No, it's not alive. It's created, fully formed, and not yet alive. So is it valuable? No. So here in the first 3, we already have some differences of opinion here. My body, my choice, you said, basically it's not even a human being or alive or valuable. In the second one, it was not a human being, but it is alive. Therefore, it's not valuable. Here, it is a human being. It's not alive, and it's therefore not valuable until it's alive. So there's contradictions in these arguments. Now, I find it funny that the liberal Christian becomes a strict literalist when it comes to the Bible all of a sudden in these cases where it's convenient for their positions on these issues and that sort of thing. But if you take that standard of taking literal interpretation of the Bible, you will see that that does not hold consistently in every case. So I have here from Luke the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, and read verses 39 to 44. So it says, "Now Mary arose in those days and went into the hill country with haste to a city of Judah, and entered the house of Zacharias and greeted Elizabeth. And it happened, when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary, that the babe leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. Then she spoke out with a loud voice and said, 'Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. But why is this granted to me, that the mother of my Lord should come to me? For indeed, as soon as the voice of your greeting sounded in my ears, the babe leaped in my womb for joy.'" So it seems like if you apply that consistently going through the Bible, you'll see in Luke chapter 1 a case of a baby in the womb responding to the voice of the mother of Jesus, and responding in joy. And you would have to ask, how can something lifeless, a lifeless blob of tissue at this point, how could that respond in joy? So I think that argument just fails.
Pretty miserably.
Pretty miserably. Yeah. So
we'll move on. Go ahead.
Well, to add to that, I mean, the whole creation account, when you go back to Adam and Eve, I mean, it spells out in there the idea of man, the human race. We as humans are created in God's image. And with that comes in immense value. Our lives are deeply valuable in the eyes of God. So this is something you have to get right. And I think as people who bear the name of Christian, it's absolutely important that we understand that life is valuable and should be protected and defended.
Definitely. And not only that, but I don't believe that it represents Scripture correctly to compare a unique situation such as Adam and Eve. That was the first man and first woman, which is a unique situation. To compare that to all of us in the same regard. Obviously, from that point on, it's one man, one woman that creates a person. So this is, it's apples, and you're comparing apples and oranges.
A lot of things that are not the norm in that situation.
Yeah, that was a very unique situation that won't probably ever happen again.
Yeah. So the other doesn't negate the other from being true. But you can't have the second case, the Luke case, be true. Yeah. And uphold the idea that life doesn't begin until the baby's outside the womb.
Breathe their first breath.
Yeah.
So, number 4. Lie is abortion is okay because the fetus is dependent upon the mother for survival. So the reason that that doesn't hold any water is infants are dependent upon us for survival from the moment they're born. Babies, we can't just leave them alone and expect them to be fine. We have to care for them. So is it okay to kill a baby just because it's dependent? Elderly, they're very dependent upon others for survival. Should we just kill all the old people just because they're dependent upon others for survival? I like the point that he brought up, conjoined twins. One person is dependent upon the other.
If
they share an organ.
Body.
Yeah.
So when you say, well, the mother and the child are attached if you try to make that exception, you even have conjoined twins that share brains, and
a
that
heart,
sort of thing.
A liver.
So it's.
Do we just get rid of the one?
Does one have the right to kill the other?
Just because they're dependent upon the other person.
that doesn't hold.
And a person with different abilities. I don't think it's okay to say disabled anymore. So I'm at a loss for a better word, but somebody who has a less of an ability, a child that is in their 20s or 30s and they're still dependent upon their parents. Somebody with multiple sclerosis or whatever, a whole slew of things that are dependent upon others. Even grown children who are living in their parents' basements are still dependent upon their parents at times. And so I think there's all moments where we're dependent upon each other. There's times where I depend upon Steve. I depend upon my husband, and he depends on me. And just because I'm at that moment the weaker person in needing his help doesn't mean that he should just get rid of me because I'm too needy, or I can be a little needy. But anyway, so I just, that one just really, the dependence doesn't make any sense.
So going back to the three questions, is it a human being? This one would say, sure, why not? Is it alive? Again, it doesn't deny that. I would just say it is not valuable.
The value is less.
It doesn't have the full value of a regular human being, because it's not able to live, independently. So, moving on to number 5.
Number 5, abortion is okay because the fetus is small and not fully developed. Just out of curiosity, I looked it up, and hate to say this, but men's brains actually don't fully develop until after age 30. At least that's what the internet says. So I've heard 25 in their 20s. So I was surprised when I saw older than 30. So a man's brain doesn't fully develop until he's in his 30s. So that would be kind of like saying all the guys before 30, we should just, do away with them because they're not fully developed.
They're not fully human yet if they're not fully developed.
Yeah.
That's basically the idea of children versus adults. Obviously there's a lot of development between a newborn
and
all the way through puberty,
and
even
in puberty
into
lots
full
of development happening
we
there.
talk about with brain development and that sort of thing. So if we're going to apply this consistently and use this as a reason to justify abortion, then I think we have to also be able to justify infanticide and different things that would be, where it's just a matter of, well, you're not fully developed yet.
You're not fully developed. Sorry, you got to go. Yeah. So that lie doesn't hold up.
Same. That one, same as the previous one in terms of the 3 questions. It basically just denies that
that there's value.
That is value.
Because they're developmentally, it's not up to par. Okay, so number 6, the lie. Abortions happen naturally all the time, so what's the difference? Death in general is natural. Doesn't make it okay to kill. I've heard online that women will say that they had an abortion, multiple abortions, one by choice and one not by choice, meaning that they had a miscarriage. A DNC is dilate and remove, basically. And once the heart beat stops, then you have to remove the child or the baby, so that way the mother does not get an infection and die. And so medically, I guess this term is considered an abortion. It falls under that category. I don't believe that is an abortion because unfortunately the baby has already died. And so even though women are saying that they had this abortion, I don't believe it is an abortion. You're not killing the baby. That procedure isn't
ending the life.
It's not ending the life. It's at that point, unfortunately, it's the removal of a death. So I think that is definitely a lie when you say it happens naturally all the time. It's considered that's a natural abortion. It's not a natural abortion. It's a miscarriage.
Yeah. And I think we both agree that this is just a dumb argument in general.
Makes absolutely no sense.
Because the reasoning is because death happens unintentionally, therefore it's okay to cause death to happen intentionally. And someone has a heart attack. Is it right for me to stab him in the heart, or something like that? By that reasoning, we can't take the initiative to cause death just because death happens naturally. So, that one fails pretty miserably, I think.
Yeah, and going back to, is it alive? At that point, a natural abortion, as they're calling it, what I would call a miscarriage, then the child is not alive.
To justify the abortion of those living, I think they would acknowledge that it's a human being and that it's alive. It's just, it's not valuable, apparently, but by the same standard, no life is valuable.
So, number 7, I'm personally opposed to abortion, but I think others should have the right. You hear that a lot. A lot of people say that they wouldn't go through with something like that, but we shouldn't take away others' rights to go through with that, to make that decision. And that is a lie. So it's basically legislating morality. Slavery. Is it okay to have a slave, but be opposed to slaves, but have others?
I'm personally opposed to slavery, but I think others should have the right to own
a slave.
I mean, you could use that logic. Obviously, we say, oh, that's horrible, so why is it different in abortion? If something is to you morally offensive and objectionable, why should you be okay with other people doing that morally objectionable thing that violates the human rights of somebody else? So
I feel like it's also just it's an easy scapegoat. You're not standing on your morals. You're just saying like, oh well, I don't believe in it, but it's okay for other people to be immoral. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's kind of a libertarian kind of view in that sense, like let me do my thing, you do your thing.
You do you,
just
which
don't bother me.
A lot.
Like in a sense, as long as your rights don't infringe on my own, but we have laws that obviously that are based in morality. I mean, that's basically the basis of all laws, is that we feel, the primary laws. Do not murder is a moral law. Do not steal. You can go and rob, the thrift store or whatever. You can't just say, oh, you can't arrest me because you're imposing your morality on me. It doesn't work that way.
Or you say, I'm feeding my children and therefore it's okay. Well, you still stole, so it's still breaking the law.
Yeah, so there's, we legislate morality all the time. So basically that one's kind of, in going back to the 3 questions, that one's kind of a weird one, because almost like the person who says that is saying, oh, I think it's valuable for me, but it's almost like relativistic morality in that sense. Like, for me, it's valuable, but for other people, it's not valuable, and
therefore it's okay.
I can't impose my morality on them. So,
I'm personally opposed to Nazis, but if they want to kill,
that's
okay.
If they want to do that, that's fine.
Yeah, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, recently heard this. The Constitution gives women the right to an abortion. Pretty sure there's nowhere in the Constitution that it says that.
They often appeal to the idea of the right to privacy, but that does not apply to taking people's um, other people's rights away. I can't imprison anybody in my home. I can't steal from people when they enter my home, or anything like that. It's not spelled out in the Constitution. You appeal to the Supreme Court, and they make decisions in interpreting the Constitution in these cases, but it's not actually spelled out in the Constitution that there's a right to abortion. That's how a group of 9 men decided that the law should be interpreted. But it's not like it says in the Constitution that a woman has a right to an abortion. If it had, it wouldn't have taken until 1973 for that right to become a right. That's nearly 200 years after the Constitution was written. So, that obviously doesn't, that argument doesn't hold. It really doesn't say anything about being a human being or alive. As far as valuable, it would say it's not as valuable as the right that's granted in the Constitution. I guess is kind of how I would assess that. But.
So, number 9, abortion is what's best for the child. You hear that people say that a lot, but what if you find out the child has Down syndrome? What if you find out that the child is disabled? Or what if it's best for the child because he would have been born into poverty? That we should save him from that life of poverty, or we should save him or her from that life of having to live disabled. I believe there's I can't remember if it's Australia or somewhere in New Zealand where supposedly Down syndrome has been eradicated, and they're saying it like
maybe
it's
Iceland, I believe.
Iceland, okay. Yeah. Where it's a wonderful thing that there's no more people being born with Down syndrome. They've cured it. It has not been cured. They're just selecting who gets to live and die based on the value. So that's saying that that person is less valuable because they are disabled, or because that person is less valuable because they're poor. They're going to be born in a community that's poor.
The real issue here is a matter of the value being assessed by someone other than that person. Yeah. So it's the mother saying the child's life isn't of value because of the circumstances that the child will be born into, without giving the child the chance to
determine its own value
for his or herself if his life is valuable in those circumstances. And there was a really moving testimony given by a guy who has Down syndrome before Congress, and he was talking about how the value of his own life and how offensive it is for others to be saying that the lives of those with Down syndrome are not of value. And even studies have shown that the homes in which children are born, allowed to, be carried to term and are born into those families, those families are happier, and those children, they bring a kind of joy that cannot be experienced even just like from kids who are born without those conditions. There's something, an appreciation for life that develops, I think, when parents have children that are disabled and have those kinds of challenges. So to say that their life isn't valuable, for themselves there is value, but there's also value for the parents of those children. And I think we often see that happen. And that's one of those things, I think, that in our own wisdom, in the circumstances, we may not see how that could be a fulfilling life or that sort of thing. But I think that we have the evidence that that
to
has
say
shown
otherwise.
shown to be that has shown to be the case, that it does bring value.
And I've also heard there's a mother that had 3 kids, I think, and 2 without Down syndrome, 1 with, and she said, I would rather have multiple babies like her because she's the first to give me a hug. She's, always has a smile on her face. She's the sweetest, most compassionate of all 3 of my kids. And we're becoming more educated today, and we understand that we're not putting limitations on people with these conditions. And I think it seems like today it's not a mark like it used to be, where yes, there are certain health problems that arise with people specifically with Down syndrome, and the doctors, they look for those markers, and then they say, okay, what are the health risks? So they're going to look at the heart, they're going to look at breathing problems, things like that. They're going to assess what the actual health issue is, and not just going to label this kid Down syndrome, failure to thrive. No, that's not the case anymore. Like, they literally will make sure that everything's working, and then send you home with your beautiful baby. I think that light is slowly but surely going to be depleted. Hopefully no one will be able to use that light or make that choice.
At the root of this is a view, I think a philosophy on suffering, and the idea that life is not valuable if there is a great deal of suffering. And in a sense, you eliminate suffering, and that then makes life worth living. But life for everyone, I think you could make a case, if that were the case, that no life is worth living, because we all endure suffering, and we all will die someday. So we're going to have to go through physical suffering. So in that case, is it wrong for parents to bring a child into the world knowing that they're going to someday die and experience physical suffering, and probably along the way experience a lot of emotional suffering through disappointments and heartaches and all sorts of things? To say that suffering devalues life, it just doesn't work.
It doesn't make any sense. And being born into poverty money, we know this, money does not equal happiness. So suffering, poverty, yes, there are times where somebody in poverty is going to suffer. However, poverty does not mean you are definitely going to suffer, or that because you have money, you're never going to suffer. So I think that just it doesn't make any sense.
So this one fails on, it challenges our third question: is it valuable? It basically says that it's not valuable if the child will experience enough suffering to make it.
That we valuable. Should just stop it before it even happens, and that just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So number 10, abortion is what's best for the woman. But so basically, she should be able to make that choice because she wants to pursue her career, and she's just started college, or she's in high school, and she can't do both. There's no way you can do both, and I have to believe. I know that that's not true. Actually, I do know that that's not true, because that was me. And I got pregnant at 23, and I was not married. And, I could have decided, but, that's putting a damper on my plans. Like, I still want to go to finish college and, have some sort of a career, and this kid's going to get in the way. And it takes a village regardless of where you are in life. And to say that, that because, your education, there are so many ways to seek help. So many ways that if it's not your family, because sometimes it's not your family. Thankfully, my family was there for me. But if it's not your family, then your friends. If you don't have a lot of family, you don't have a lot of friends, or you're new to a community, there are so many community programs in every community that are wanting to help kids, and there is always a way. There is always a way, and my heart really breaks when I hear this, that it's best for the mother, that it's gonna ruin her life. And it's just not true. And I think that one, for me, not only hits home, but it's particularly scary to our young girls who do find themselves pregnant and scared. And people are giving them these lies and telling them that they shouldn't, that there's no hope, that this is the only way. And it's not true. It is not the only way. And it's never best for the woman, because that guilt and shame, it stays with you. I personally have not. I chose life, but I know others who have unfortunately not chosen life and regretted it. That stays with them every single day, and not just with them, but the fathers too, that were scared and they made that decision, and they made it together, and now that can't be undone, and that is something that they live with for the rest of their lives. And somebody is saying, like, this, you may have seen on the internet this lie, that I'm a better mother now because of my abortion. I hear that, and I can't believe that. One, you don't know, because you already had the abortion, and you probably would have been a fine mother with multiple kids. Yes, it would have probably changed some things, and you would have had to rearrange things, but to say you're a better mother because of this abortion, it's just not true. I've heard people say, I drive better drunk. Yeah, no, you don't. So I don't think that women are better mothers because they killed all those other babies and then now they're ready to be a mom. I think that it's a selfish choice in that regard, because not only are you taking that baby from your own life, but you're taking that baby from the rest of the family's lives. And that's just something you can't get back. And the back alley abortion debate, it's like, oh, if we ban it, then it's going to be all these women being susceptible to these back alley abortions like you see in the movies. And I think that is a lie that's being perpetuated, because he has a good explanation on why that doesn't hold up.
Yeah, it's basically, well, one, before abortion was legal, the numbers of back alley abortions, I mean, I don't know that we have an exact number on it, but we've had over 61 million legal abortions in the last 46 years. The number of back alley abortions that have occurred were considerably smaller. I don't think you can make laws based on, well, let's make a safer way for a really bad practice to be legal. Should we legalize heroin use, for example? Should we make it more safe for injecting yourself? Should we make it, should we allow kids who are underage to drink and get drunk, as long as we're supervising them, or things like that? Do we want to make our laws to enable behaviors that are morally objectionable? But the alternative may be worse when that law is broken. Unfortunately, when laws are broken, the way that plays out is often not pretty. Um, so while we don't want to see negative things happen as a result of abortion being illegal, things that maybe don't happen now. At the same time, I think the overall benefit, you're saving, potentially tens of millions of lives. This is an argument that goes to number 3 again. Is it valuable? It's basically saying that the overall welfare, the pursuit of happiness for the woman outweighs the right to life. We go back to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. This is basically saying the pursuit of happiness for someone who's already living is more valuable than that basic right to life. And I think that's backwards.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And the life of the mother is important, but the life of that child is also as well. And so the next lie is that, number 11, abortion is good for society. That's basically, I'm pretty sure, what Hitler thought as well, which is selectional killing for the sake of the greater whole. So I don't know if you want to talk about that.
That's an argument from eugenics, which the definition of eugenics, for those who are unaware, the practice or advocacy of controlled selective breeding of human populations as by sterilization to improve the population's genetic composition. So in this case, it's not sterilizing, going around and sterilizing people, but it is, in a sense, there is strategic targeting of different communities of people, particularly minority communities. That's where you will find abortion clinics by and large.
They're in poor communities. They're in communities that are high in minorities. The population is mostly minorities. You'll also find that most Planned Parenthoods are put directly in line with bus stops. So there's absolutely no excuse as to why you can't get an abortion. If you don't have a car, you can take the bus there. So they're trying to make it as accessible as possible to target minorities and people that are in poverty.
Yeah, and there was a popular book a few years back that came out called Freakonomics, and the idea in that there was a controversial part in that where I guess the author talked about crime statistics dropping in ever since the passing of Roe v. Wade, and kind of using that argument. And in a sense, it's like a justification, like, well, society is better now because we passed abortion rights, which we want to think about this. Well, there are reasons why that statistic has been challenged, which I'm not going to get into that. That's for others to analyze. But the question is society better by when we have the legalized killing of a certain group of people, a segment of the population? It may be better for those living, but at the cost of those whose lives are taken. When we look at cases of genocide, I mean, if you're doing genocide to better the lives of those who are on the right side of it, you're getting rid of those unwanted people in society at the cost of the others. And I mean, as a Christian, this goes, completely opposite of the Christian ethic, which modeled in Christ was laying down your own life for the sake of another, and to see that we as a society are sacrificing the lives of others, if we're justifying that on the basis that we are bettering our own lives, you can see the selfishness in that. When we are called, as Christians, we are called to live a selfless life, a life of self-sacrifice, and that requires us to do difficult things for the benefit of other people, and I think about it as like, what benefit do we have to oppose abortion? If we are, going to be dragged down in any way by having more children being born, we could be concerned about, well, how are we going to, are our taxes going to go up because there are more kids that have to be, supported by the government, or that sort of thing. It doesn't make any sense for those of us who are more conservative to support, a ban on abortion unless we are really convicted in the idea that this is morally wrong. So
you do have to be willing to stand up and help care for these kids, and I think that it is possible. And trying to say that abortion is health care, and therefore good for society. It's not health care. We went over, when it's considered health care in the event that it's a miscarriage, and the baby needs to be removed. Yes, that's health care, but I believe that's a miscarriage and not abortion. And saying that it is health care, it just isn't true. And unfortunately, I didn't know about the pregnancy care centers in my area when I found out I was pregnant. And now I'm learning, and now I understand that there's always an alternative. Pregnancy care centers are in most areas, if not all, and there's going to be a place that where you don't have to go to Planned Parenthood or even to your doctor to get this done. That you can go to a pregnancy care center, that you can get an ultrasound, you can get all of the care that you need, prenatal vitamins, all of that stuff. You don't have to get all that through Planned Parenthood.
And just this argument for the greater good. I mean, it just I don't think you can just justify saying that society is better when we have something like this that we're tolerating in our society.
And so that brings us to the last point. And this one is difficult. It's very heated, and it's talked about a lot. But the thing that I think, I believe people should know is that it's not the majority of abortions. It actually is the minority of abortions. And the number one reason that it seems a lot of people push for abortion is in the case of rape. And through studying, it comes to my attention that I was surprised that it's actually 0.5% of reasons that an abortion is necessary. So although a lot of people say it's because of rape, it's actually not the reason that a lot of women are seeking abortions. And so I just, I believe that's definitely a lie. It's a fallacy that's being, screamed from the rooftops that we need to have abortion legal for rape victims or incest. That's another, a big hot topic, and that falls under the same category. Rape and incest is 0.5%. Yes, it is incredibly hard on a rape victim. But the value of an unwanted child, it's saying that the value of suffering for this person is a higher value than the value of this unwanted child. And I think that we should be focusing more on not lying to these women and telling them that they shouldn't have these children because it's going to remind them of the pain. I think that that is a lie, because when you have that abortion due to rape, that pain doesn't go away. It's not a quick fix. It doesn't remove the trauma. It doesn't remove those emotional scars or maybe physical scars. It only, reminds them, not only did you have to suffer through that terrible experience, but now you shouldn't have that baby as a reminder. And that's a lie, because you will never forget the fact that you had an abortion. And it's not something to be celebrated. And I think that personally for me is something that I just am so appalled by, that so many people are wanting to celebrate. And I understand not wanting to be silent. I understand not wanting to feel shame. And I don't think that we should be shaming women that have gone through that. I think that they need healing, and that they need trauma therapy. And I think that trauma counseling, PTSD, there's so many people that don't even know what PTSD means, what it stands for, what that looks like, how to deal with that. And I think that we're just barely scratching the surface of trauma and what that can do to your life, and how you need to really seek healing. And I think that telling somebody that they shouldn't have to suffer anymore, therefore, they should be able to get rid of it and then they'll be fine. It's a lie. And personally speaking, when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't have the resources that I knew were out there. I didn't know of those resources. Going to Planned Parenthood, being scared to death. My sister went with me, and being told, yes, you are pregnant. That's confirmed. I know for me, if this was not an option, I wouldn't have ever considered it. If this was illegal, then I would have never even asked the question. I would have just said, okay, this is this, and that's that, and we're gonna get through this. But you can't walk through those doors without it being just so evident that is their bread and butter, that they are trained to talk you into it. And I went in and they told me yes, and I was just terrified. And it's a terrifying, scary, isolating situation to be young and unmarried and pregnant. And statistically, most abortions are unmarried women. And I think that that's unfortunate and that's sad, and that makes absolutely no sense. That should not be a reason. And so, from my own personal experience, having sat there and been told this information, and then the next thing is like, what do you want to do about it? It was scary. And so, she gave me the pamphlet, and, I walked out of those doors and I just sobbed. And my poor sister, she didn't know what to do. She just kind of stood there, and I'm definitely the more emotional one, and she's the more logical one. And the first thing she said is, Mom and Dad are going to be there. Mom and Dad are going to help us through this. And, and it's going to be okay. And thank God that I had her. But the second person that I saw after being told this information, I call him my angel, and I won't say his name for privacy purposes, but was a guy I actually went to school with, and he walked out of the dentist office having just had a crown put on, and he walked straight up to me, not knowing if I had just had an abortion, not knowing what news I was given. You know, and at that point I'm just sobbing, and he saw me, and he just knew that God wanted me to know as soon as I found out that God still loved me. And that was the first thing he said. He says, you know, I don't know your situation, but I feel like God is telling me to tell you that God still loves you, that Jesus loves you. And at that point in my life, you know, I had grown up going to church with my friends and was a Christian, but had fallen away from living a pure life, and I was lost and scared, and having that reminder that Christ still loved me regardless was life-saving for my daughter, absolutely life-saving. And, you know, he invited me to church, and I didn't ultimately go to that church that he invited me to until years later. But I did, once my baby was born, we started going to church and everything. And through, of course, the magic of Facebook, found him and updated him, and we've remained friends and everything. And for him, you know, to hear that, you know, that was a positive experience, and that, you know, she was born and she's doing great and she's amazing, you know, is he didn't know, but he stepped out in faith, and just proclaimed that Christ still loved me. And I think that is what we desperately want people to know, is there are so many lies being perpetuated. And I mean, there's times where, you know, in our home that we're having these debates and these discussions, and my daughter is of age to understand. She's 13 now, and these things are not, I mean, they're being taught to our kids. You know, the other day at school, she tells me that Planned Parenthood came to her school instead of her health teacher telling her, you know, about this information, that somebody from Planned Parenthood came. And this is happening. This is happening now. Our children are being indoctrinated at a young age. I mean, study into it. There have been, you know, they give low doses of birth control that have to be taken every single day at the same time, you know, for these girls. And if they miss it, you know, then, oh, sorry, okay, you missed one pill, you're pregnant, no, just get an abortion. It makes absolutely no sense. And we are failing our children, and we are failing women, and the men that are believing these lies. And we just, our passion for life and for the sanctity of life to continue is just so strong. And, you know, these conversations that we have that have just really shaken us. And that's, you know, really why we wanted to make this video, to just shed truth and real light into these issues. And, you know, just personally, I feel like, you know, Christians have been painted this bad picture, and we just, you know, we can't speak for all Christians, but we speak for ourselves when we say that, you know, that's not true. We're not hateful. We're not trying to control, you know, women's reproductive organs. That's not what this is. It's protecting life, because they are human beings. They are alive, and they are valuable. And I just thank you guys for watching.
Yeah, thank you.